Honestly, I don't know. I don't. It's something that just happened because it was a product of everything we've already gone over. As a coach, you have to love what you're doing. You have to love the kids, number one. If you're not a champion for kids, then what are you doing? Then you're in it for yourself. And I'm proud to say that Brent and I are never in it for ourselves, and the coaches that we choose to work with and choose to have on, we see the same thing. So I never set out for that. I never set out for titles.
Hey there, podcast listener. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Eat Half, Walk Double podcast, coming to you from the Ascend Endurance Coaching Studios here in beautiful Stratford, New Hampshire, US of A. I'm your host, Chris Dunn. If you follow the show, well, thank you and welcome back. So this show chronicles my 4 decades in endurance sports as an exercise physiologist, coach, race director, and athlete, told through the stories of the important, influential, and interesting people I've met along the way. While I catch up with friends, colleagues, rivals, clients, and the occasional family member, it's my hope you'll learn a little something about health, fitness, and the secrets to living well along the way. Tim Cox is my guest this week. When it's all said and done, he will undoubtedly go down as one of the most successful New Hampshire scholastic running coaches of all time. If you ask me, though, the most interesting part of his story is not the accomplishments, but rather how he got here. In life, we are all given the opportunity for experiences to define us or to shape us. It's always our choice. As a schoolboy in Suffern, New York, the lessons he learned through athletics had an incredibly powerful, positive impact on him. As a collegiate athlete, his experience was quite different, but nonetheless transformative. Through it all, he learned valuable lessons about life from the leaders, coaches, and mentors that still mean so much to him. Well, here he is, Tim Cox. Tim, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Middle of winter, voice a little hoarse from still doing some coaching, and just enjoying running and teaching and same old.
Well, it's good to see you, and it's a pleasure to spend a little time with you. So we communicated a little bit back and forth prior to the show today, as I was giving you a little bit of my my show prep, and I actually also just shared a photo with you. So I was doing some show research, and actually, and the show research really was me scrolling through your photos on Facebook. And as I was doing that, I stumbled upon an iconic snowshoe racing photo that Scott Mason took at the 2010 Beaver Brook Snowshoe Race in Hollis, New Hampshire. You know the one, right? That mass start with all that powdery snow flying everywhere. Now you were there, and you're actually in that photo, despite the fact that all you can see is your red hat behind Jim Johnson. So you finished second behind Jim that day.
Yeah, luckily.
What do you? And I mean, there was actually a pretty talented field. I'm looking at the photo now. I see Dave Dunham. I see Bob Jackman. I see Chris Smith. Sean Snow is actually right behind you. Our teammate, beloved teammate Jeremiah Fitzgibbon is in that photo too. Anyway, what do you remember about that race?
I have no business being there. I had no business being a snowshoe racer. It was, that's kind of reserved for mountain racers, and I'm not great at running. I was never great at running hills or running mountains, and I've come from a track background, and I love cross country, but that's totally different. It was mostly from getting to know you and seeing some of the common names that we had back in those days, like a Dave Dunham, like a Jim Johnson, and they were talking about how much fun snowshoe racing is. And as at the time of my running, I wouldn't even say it was a career then. It was just my running experience where I run so many road races, dabbled in the marathon a couple times, and, track and cross country. It's, I was 37, 38, so I wanted to try something new. And I was darn lucky to get second, not knowing what the heck I was doing. And just, you told me what snowshoes to buy. I bought them after borrowing them a couple times and just jumped in with both feet, I think for a season or two, but it was definitely a brief snowshoe racing career. And but it was a lot of fun, and especially when conditions were great. I mean, conditions are great. You can't really beat it for a wintertime sport or competition anyway, outside.
Yeah. So. And as you think back on those days and those winters in which you dabbled a little bit in snowshoe racing, did you find that when you spent a winter or two doing a little bit more running in snowshoes and racing in snowshoes, that you oftentimes emerged in the spring maybe just a little bit fitter than you otherwise normally would be as a road runner or trail runner here in New Hampshire? I mean, it's not easy as a road runner or trail runner or track athlete here in New Hampshire to kind of keep your fitness high in the wintertime, just because conditions are always a challenge. But I mean, did you feel any of that benefit associated with being on snowshoes, at least in that brief period of time that you raced on snowshoes?
I definitely felt stronger. I definitely felt refreshed from the grind, because I used to do a lot of indoor track. So it was doing something new, and you're obviously not using different muscles, but you're using them differently. It definitely refreshed me mentally and made me stronger physically, but I would not say it made me faster.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was snowshoeing's issue. Was me getting older and my priorities changing. Some of my fondest memories are, my family being there, and my son and my daughter tried one. Addison tried one, and that was it for her. But my son Aiden had a blast doing it. So it's something that, at that time in my life, I was looking for ways to spice it up for my kids also, and also for the kids I coached. I mean, we were able to, finagle a couple of kids, talk some kids out to trying it. Kind of never more than once. It was a little hard for them.
Surprisingly.
But we were able to use that a ton. So I love it as when we had conditions like we had sort of consistently. I love it and still do. I still have my snowshoes. I still jump out, once or twice when we have good conditions here. But it's I still love it as a cross training activity. It doesn't beat you up if you know what you're doing and if you're on good conditions. So but the memories are fond, and the more I thought about a couple of those pictures you sent and a couple of the experiences we had, it just brought a smile to my face, because it was just great times.
Well, what was special about those times is that, there are a couple of things, at least in my opinion. First of all, back then, 2009, 2010, that sort of time frame is when you were racing, and I was racing as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, there literally was a snowshoe race somewhere in New England and oftentimes somewhere in New Hampshire. Nearly every weekend in the wintertime. Generally, the winter is about 13 weeks long or so. And so, at least for me, and I wonder about for you, snowshoe racing really sort of made the winter fly by.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not an alpine skier. I don't snowboard. I mean, I enjoy being outside in the wintertime. But I had no other, recreational diversions to kind of get me through the winter. But snowshoe racing was certainly that for me. And then, the opportunity to stay connected to and even establish connections with this snowshoe racing community. To your earlier point, there were certainly a lot of people at that time in the snowshoe racing community that were trail runners and mountain runners. And so, if you were in the trail running and mountain running scene, then you'd see a lot of those folks in the wintertime and snowshoe racing. But there were also people came from other disciplines as well. There were triathletes, and there were cross country runners, and there were road runners. And so while there was some overlap between communities, trail running community, snowshoe racing community, mountain racing community. Snowshoe racing sort of became its own sort of unique community. I mean, do you feel that way about it, looking back and thinking about those times?
What I really enjoyed was the new faces. You're absolutely right. There was a snowshoe racing community. The series when Whitaker Woods, all the way. I mean, Cole Brown hosted. We hosted one at one point in time. I mean, it got super popular. So you're absolutely right. It was its own little community in a very spirited way. I remember doing the side hiller. It was one of the last ones I did. The side hiller, one of the last years it was held. The frustration of getting my snowshoe ripped off my foot in the first mile. And oh gosh. But anyway, but just the same people. And it's so supportive. And, there are parallels for sure with the trail racing, mountain racing community, because it's just so more cooperative versus competitive. You are competing for sure during the race, but it airs more on the side of cooperation as far as pushing each other, just like, competition is supposed to be, but it's not as intense. It's got that fun loving, but competing, but competitive, but it's just a kind of, we're in this together against the conditions, just as much as against each other, because the conditions for snowshoe racing were always variable. So you had to be ready for anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of a way to scratch the competitive itch in the wintertime without it being punitive, right? Without beating yourself up because maybe you didn't perform up to expectations, because it was snowshoe racing, and on its face it was absolutely ridiculous. We were running with snowshoes on our feet in all sorts of conditions, in knee high unbroken snow to at times bare ground and ice. I mean, I
think my first one was with Mike Amarello, was down in, what was that one? The conditions were awful, like now knowing. And I think all our snowshoes got busted up, but we all wanted to be there and do it. And it was, my gosh, that course was hell, up, down, turn around. I was surprised we didn't jump off a cliff, and it was awesome. So don't get me wrong, but
I do remember at times as a snowshoe race director, I will admit to actually shoveling snow onto the single track so that we would have snow to run on. Those were very fond memories indeed. Tim, for the listener who doesn't know Tim Cox, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Tim Cox. How you doing? I'm a almost 50-year-old husband, father of three, been married for 22 plus years, and I've lived in New Hampshire for just about as long. I was born in Connecticut, but grew up in New York. Grew up 28 minutes from Yankee Stadium, so it's in my blood. Have a mother-in-law that's a staunch Red Sox fan, so we have great spirited discussions at dinner. Then grew up in New York, went to Suffern High School, a very traditionally athletic school. I ran cross country and track and played baseball, ironically, my freshman, sophomore year. But then when I batted 227 my sophomore year and I was on the varsity cross country and track teams, I'm like, I think I should give this a shot. Finally trained in the summer and was able to have a real good second half of my high school career that I translated into going to UNC Wilmington, which is a D1 mid-major school down on the coast of North Carolina. Got some of it paid for, thankfully, and met my wife there. Got my degree. I'm a teacher at Cole Brown Northwood Academy, a very proud, small, awesome school in the middle of New Hampshire, and a one-stoplight town right smack dab between Concord and Portsmouth. That is really my pride as far as professionals working there. As a teacher and a coach for my adult life. I've been there for 22 years and ended up in New Hampshire because I met a Massachusetts girl, and when I was in grad school, and she was too. And after she finished her master's degree and I finished a couple of years teaching down in North Carolina, we wanted to move closer to family. I still had family in New York, and she obviously had family in Massachusetts. Neither of us wanted to move back to New York or Massachusetts. We wanted to move to a more nature-filled state, if you will. I wouldn't say rural, but it is what it is. And we just wanted less people and more places to have fun. regarding running, regarding adventure, regarding just being outside. So New Hampshire won out, and I owed a lot of it to Brent Kasich, who has been my co-coach for the same amount of time. He actually was coaching and teaching at Co-Brown for a year or two prior. It was instrumental in getting me the job in the special ed program there, and obviously coaching together. So, yeah, I mean, that's the long and the short of it. I had a great high school experience. I had I'm still going to call it a great college experience because it shaped a lot of how I coached, why I coached. And I really think the passion behind my coaching was because of my college experience. And my competitiveness definitely has a lot to do with it. I'm a pretty competitive person. It's definitely has shaped over the years from being a very intense and not understanding winning and losing very well as a young kid to high schooler, to understanding the worth of losing and how to apply that to future athletic experiences. So, yeah, that's the long and the short of it. My biggest pride and joy, obviously, is my family, my kids especially, and using sports coaching tool experiences to shape them into strong and confident, healthy, good choice making adults. And I feel like we're on the right track. And I have a daughter who's a second year at University of Virginia. And I have a senior boy, Aiden, and my daughter's name is Addison. And then I have my youngest 11-year-old who, if Addison's the verbose, loud, emotional one like her dad, and Aiden is the quiet, reserved, but very intense competitor like his mother. Broden is neither of those. He is a combination of both in a very good, positive, and hilarious way at times. He definitely commands the room when he's in it, and it's because we want him to command it. So he's just a great kid. So, that's it in a nutshell. That's me, I guess, and I'm sure we'll pull more stuff out during this talk. So
yeah, that was that was great framing for what I want to talk about. So I want to talk about all those areas. Because I think you have a really interesting story to tell as an athlete, as a coach, as a dad and a coach, and I want to dive into all of those. But let's do this. Let's for the listener, let's share with the listener how you and I came to know each other, because part of the spirit of this podcast is sort of me telling my story through the stories of the important, interesting or influential people that I've met along the way. And you certainly qualify in terms of interesting, important, and influential. So, your story, Tim, really is part of my story. So let's talk a little bit about how you and I kind of came to know each other. But and to do that, let me set it up this way. So those that know you as an athlete, right, know you as an accomplished runner who's remained highly competitive and successful well into his 40s. But what they might not know is that you're also a champion obstacle course racer. I mean, that's not technically false, Tim. That is actually technically true. My question is, do you want to tell the story of the 2010 Hoppin' Mad Mud Run, or shall I?
I think you should start us off.
So
that was a lot of fun. I mean, that was a blast.
So, to back up to get us to 2010, we came to know each other thanks to my oldest daughter, Madison, who ran for you at Co-Brown Northwood Academy. And I mean, I want to say, Tim, we were probably introduced in 2008 or so, 2009, 2008, 2009. My daughter graduated, actually my two oldest graduated in 2011. Yeah. So it was probably 2008, 2009, somewhere in and along there. But again, almost certainly it was because it was because Madison ran for you, unless you remember something different than that.
No, I just remember you as obviously as a parent, but I don't know, when you coach as long as I have, and you meet parents, because you meet a lot of parents, and the way we run our program anyway, it's very heavily, parents have to be heavily involved. We put on several events during the year where we wouldn't be able to do it without parent volunteers. So, Brent Casey called me the mayor a couple of times because I shook a lot of hands at our barbecues, and I truly enjoyed doing that and meeting new people. So, certain people stand out, and you're one of them that stood out. You know, you can, as I think even our audience can attest for, you see runners in crowds, or you see athletes, and you see folks that you automatically have a jaw to, and you automatically know you have similar interests. So I remember that feeling when I met you. But I was super impressed with Madison from the get-go, even though she was quiet. She's a pretty runner, and you could tell that she was receiving the coaching and trying to apply it the best way she could, and that's all you can ask for as a coach, you know. So that's what I remember, and and then I started hearing and learning about acidotic racing, and I'm like, man, that sounds a lot like PR racing, which is where I spent the first 10 years up here, and the competitive running scene, and I was looking for something different as that was waning, and obviously, as I mentioned before, so that's what I remember, and I'm not great at remembering specifics of initial conversations. Kids remind me of the first things I say to them, and a lot of times I'm in a weird way, I'm intimidated because there's 50 or 60 kids looking at you. So when I'm intimidated, I have diarrhea of the mouth, and I just start talking and cracking jokes. And one story is, and this is, they're all kind of my favorites in their own ways, but very quiet kid, and she was a basketball player and a runner, and she went on to play basketball in college. And she said the first thing I asked her, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, was, "Do you smoke pot?" I think that was the first thing I asked her. But I think I was, we were in a little bit of a quick diatribe about what our standards are, and it was more of a levity type of situation, and she was just laughing. I think when I see her now, she keeps reminding me of that. So anyway, I went off on a tangent there. That was like early 2000s. I think we were still allowed to ask that then. I don't know. So,
well, what I remember is, of course, to your point, we did have a lot in common, and you absolutely showed an interest in what we were doing at that time competitively with acidotic racing, our team, and it wasn't long after you and I came to meet each other that we were actually racing together as teammates. You and I, in fact, you and I and Brent Kasich, our teammate Rye Fanistock, and my best friend from high school, Dwight Hartman, went down to Amesbury, Mass. in May of 2010, and we raced in the inaugural Hoppin' Mad Mud Run.
Yeah.
So it was a team obstacle course race, right? The idea was that our team time was the time of our last teammate to cross the finish line. But the idea is we would race through this approximately 10-kilometer course. We would race through it together. Well, the first 2 miles of the race were actually on pavement. We had to run around the back of this farm in order to get to the entrance of the farming fields where all the obstacles were.
Yeah.
So, of course, 2 miles on the road was right up your alley and Brent's alley too. I mean, you guys were obviously still fit, but super fit at that point, and particularly super fit on the road. So we start, and I'll never forget. like within the first 100 meters, you had gapped all of us. I mean, you were probably easily running 5:05s, 5:10s. I mean, you were just absolutely flying. I think at one point you looked over your shoulder and realized we were 100 meters behind you and we were all sucking wind. So you backed off a little bit, let us all catch up. But we still, those first 2 miles, I think we averaged like 6-minute miles. On pavement, and this is an obstacle course race. Now we haven't negotiated any obstacles yet. Well, we finally get to the obstacles, and it's a series of climbing under things and climbing over things and mud and tires and all the sort of A-frames and ropes, all the typical obstacle course racing stuff. So we finish. And interestingly enough, so this is 2010. Interestingly enough, at that time, none of us were wearing a GPS-enabled device because I don't really think GPS-enabled devices were a terribly common thing back in 2010. In fact,
were cell phones invented then? I don't remember.
It was probably the dawn of them, right? And also, interestingly enough, none of us had a stopwatch. So all we could basically do, and all we basically did, was sort of guesstimate at our time. Now, turns out the event was chip timed. We had a timing chip in one of our bibs. And because it was a staggered start, teams starting,
you had no idea.
You had really no idea who you were racing against. But we felt like 45-ish minutes was going to be pretty competitive. Yeah. So we stuck around for the award ceremony because we felt like 45 minutes was going to be pretty competitive. And the award ceremony starts, and they're going through all the awards. Well, they get to the all male teams, and they start reading off third place, and they call up third place. It's not us, so we're like, okay, we got to be in the top two. They call the second place team, and it wasn't us. And now we're smiling at each other, fist bumping, like we got this, like we won this event. They call the first place team, and it wasn't us.
Yeah. What the heck?
And so all of a sudden, like the rest of you guys looked at me like, what just happened? And
I'm like, go fix this, Chris.
Yeah, you have to go fix. Because they were also calling off times, and clearly our time was the fastest time. Well, I waited for the entire award ceremony to finish and wrap up, and I walked over to the race director, and I sort of very calmly explain the situation. Yeah. And right away, the color went out of his face as he realized what had happened. They had suspected all along that the chip in our bib was faulty.
Oh, there you go. And
in fact, that's exactly what happened. The chip, the chip malfunctioned, and our time was never recorded. Even though none of us had a stopwatch, we none of us had an official time. They took our guesstimated time.
They did.
And the race director actually went and not only got us equivalent first place prizes, but also wrote us a check for the first place prize money. In other words, he paid out the first place prize money 2 times. He paid it out to the people that he thought won and the people that actually won, which was us.
Is that race still around?
It's not.
That's why he pays double the prize money.
We actually went back. We went back the next year in 2011, defended our title, and then I think shortly after that, I think that was probably about the time that things like Spartan races started to be sort of become prominent, and the little mom and pop races that were doing it to raise money for charity just sort of had a really difficult time competing. Tim, you mentioned a little bit earlier about that time in your life athletically, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, in which you were looking to do some things a little bit differently. In fact, at that time, not only did you and I race together in an obstacle course race, but we did a multi-sport team relay, the Pinnacle Challenge, right? And we also did a mountain trail race called Mountain Epic up at Sunday River. But what was that time like for you athletically? 2009, 10, 11. What was it that you were looking for that maybe was a little different than what you had been doing?
It was definitely casual, because at the time, Addison was 6 years old, 7 years old, and Aiden was 4 or 5. And I'd made I was coaching a lot. So I was coaching cross country, indoor and outdoor track. It's 3 varsity sports in a year, and it was just a lot. So I needed something casual. I'd worn out as an athlete, because of my life, because of the balancing act of being a dad and a husband and a teacher and a coach. And I was exhausted, to be honest. I was banged up a lot at that time, but it was mostly just exhaustion. And what your friendship and Acidotic provided was me not having to think about putting a schedule together and just saying, okay, I'm just going to go do what Chris does and what Acidotic does. And I'm going to keep an open mind. And I want to still scratch the itch of competition, because the Hoppin' Mad Mud Run was a blast. The Pinnacle Challenge was a blast. And Mountain Epic, it was kind of, I wanted to, in a casual way without having to plan. I wanted to challenge my body, because, you get, I think every stage of life, you're thinking you're at the end. Once you're over 30, 35.
Yeah. Athletically speaking.
Athletically speaking, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Correct. Thanks for the correction. But
yeah.
in some cases, that's I love living that way, because at that point in time, I was open to any kind of challenge. The Pinnacle Challenge was awesome because it's a team. Like, what I loved about what our experiences were is we had the semblance of a team with whatever we did, and that's what I was looking for, without having the obligation, so to speak, for like a New England Grand Prix type of deal, but more of a hey, what's the next adventure? Let's go see how we can do, and let's have fun and experience something new. So, and I wanted to experience my limitations. I was still running a lot. It didn't mean that I wasn't running a lot. I was still running a lot. So the Pinnacle Challenge, but especially Mountain Epic. Again, I got to give a little credit to Brent Kasich and Amy Kasich with that one too. They sort of had an experience up there, and I'm like, man, that sounds awesome. I remember running with Amy on a portion of the race because she's super strong in the mountains. But I also remember descending and just learning a ton about my body and who I am as an athlete at that time, and really trying to get the most out of it with almost little preparation because of the time I had. So not to be less romantic about that, it just was that's what it was. I mean, it's a very dedicated coach, still am in a lot of respects. So that professionally, teaching came first, coaching was a very close 1A. And as professionally speaking, and running was a distant fifth behind everything else. So, I mean, it's, I'm sure everybody experiences this when you become a parent. And, when Addison was born, when I was 31 years old, I never saw the other side of 7 a.m., but all of a sudden I found myself running and working out at 5 a.m. because I didn't want to miss anything. And I wanted to support my wife with everything we were doing for our kids. So it became more of a lifestyle. So it was more of what can I fit into my lifestyle without missing? Because I feel, looking back, I missed some because of coaching, and I didn't want my own. I just put my own aspirations in the back burner because, high school, college, before kids, you can make it a priority. But when you have kids, and we prioritize that as a family and as a husband and a wife, and that was really important. So it's kind of where I was. It wasn't a priority, but it didn't mean that I didn't have fun and didn't have a blast and didn't learn a lot. And I really discovered at that time, to answer the question finally, the true value of what we do, about exercise and adventure and outdoor sports, and the true value of what it has on you as a person. Notwithstanding the long-term health benefits, but more of the day-to-day, not just stress relief, but the opposite of that, feeling great about yourself. So that helped parlay into my coaching, my teaching, being a husband, being a dad, because if you're not happy, then it's hard to be happy for others, including your own family. So that was my way. And obviously I thank you and thank Acidotic and thank all those events for challenging us. So that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah.
That time.
I mean, they were, those times were, those were different times for me as well.
Yeah.
Athletically, I was, Acidotic racing as a team, really that was its zenith as a team, in terms of the types of things that we would participate in, the team types of things that we would participate in. To your point, Pinnacle Challenge, we did the 24 hours of Great Glen, the mountain bike race for several years. And
I think I would be into that now because I've been doing a lot of fat tire biking over the past 4 or 5 years.
For sure.
Back then, I did not have the confidence on the skinny tires.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I know you have. And I mean, we're going to get to this as when we talk about coaching, but it's this idea of, and this certainly from your history as an athlete too, particularly as a high school and collegiate athlete. There's something about the shared experience of being part of a team, and how those shared experiences bond you more tightly to the people that you experience them with. It's any team sport, in my opinion. There's a much deeper connection to your teammates, particularly if again you have the opportunity to share these experiences, and I think even more so when you get to share these experiences in outdoor spaces. There's a deep connection and deep bond that's formed. I'm going to ask you more about that when we get into coaching. What I want to do though quickly is double back a little bit and pick up on something you mentioned about your high school years and then collegiately from an athletic standpoint. I mean, you mentioned that you only ran competitively for 2 years in high school, your junior year and your senior year.
Yeah,
right.
Full year. So I was always a runner. So, I was always kind of the long distance.
Got it.
I grew up in New York and I ran cross country and I ran cross. All right. Here's a funny story. You'll appreciate this. So we had a junior high school in New York. So it's a middle school, true middle school, 7th and 8th graders. And, ran cross country, had a great experience. Mr. Isaac McCormick, phenomenal, great coach, great guy. But we didn't have indoor track for middle school. So in 7th grade, I went out for the basketball team, got cut because I was a good defense. I played good defense, but every time I would drive, I'd get stuffed because I couldn't jump. And my outside shot was not on at the time. So I got cut. But then there was an A team and a B team and I got cut. So I was really good at basketball. So then I did spring track. And then my 8th grade year, I was not going to go out for the basketball team again. So I was going to try wrestling. But then the high school team, the coach brought me up. So I ran indoor track as an 8th grader. And so I ran freshman year, I ran cross country indoor track. But by the end of indoor track, the last sport that I could not give up was baseball. I had given up lacrosse, obviously basketball. I've given up soccer. But it just like everybody's journey, you kind of find which sport you have a passion for. And I couldn't give up baseball. Plus I was tired of running. So I didn't train on my own. I just went to practices and I loved the racing. I loved the competition. I did not like the running. But growing up in New York versus growing up in New Hampshire, part of you can understand why. We didn't have trails. We didn't have mountains. We didn't have beautiful places to run. It was around our neighborhoods and dodging cars. And, sometimes that was fun, but not all the time. So I needed a break and baseball was my fave. I should have quit baseball my sophomore year. But I was stubborn. I didn't like to be wrong. I batted .390 my freshman year. So I was full of myself. And I was like, I'll just come back and do the same thing. But it wasn't until my junior year that I ran the 12 months that I even preach to kids now, it's not to talk them into doing it. It's just to say, hey, if you are able to do this, then you'll notice a huge difference after 12 months of not running every day, but just consistency. So that's when I first learned that. And I was super fortunate to have 2 great coaches coach me in high school. Joe Biddy, who actually ended up coaching for 49 years at our public high school. And then also Mr. Ralph Coleman. Both are very different from one another. Matter of fact, Brent Kasich and he and I remind me of them. Super motivator was Mr. Biddy, like Brent. Knew how to get the most out of his athletes, doing several different techniques. And then Mr. Coleman was very much from the training aspect, exercise physiology, if you will. And he and I identified super well together. He was the head coach for spring track. He was super pissed at me when I didn't go out freshman year, went and talked to me after sophomore year. But then he's a true educator, obviously forgave. And we did some great stuff together. Ran 9:14 in high school, not on super shoes. Could almost run barefoot with the shoes we had. But it was a great experience. So I learned a lot about training from Mr. Coleman, and I still use several of his workouts. I used them for myself in college when I coached myself a couple seasons, and I worked with one of my teammates, John Collins. We still use Mr. Coleman's workouts, and Cole Brown sees Mr. Coleman's workouts almost in a lot of what we do. I might place them a little bit differently. I've adapted them for several years. We talked on the phone regarding what I was doing and how I was adapting them, because he just loved the sport and he loved hearing about it. So those are great experiences. Never won a state title. Winning a state title in New York is pretty tough. That's such a big state. They don't even have team state titles for indoor and outdoor track. They have them for cross country. We were vying for the state title, believe it or not, in the largest school class. My senior year, I didn't tell you this on our preliminary conversations, but and at the time I had like University of Virginia, which this is ironic. University of Virginia recruiting me. I got sick. We had sickness go through our team a couple of weeks prior to the state meet. It was my turn state meet. The state meet was held on a very muddy course, rainy day, and we were in the middle. And if anybody's seen cross country races, if you're in the middle and the sides kind of come and crush you, and I got crushed. I fell, slid across the mud, and I'm not exaggerating, 15 feet. Our number 2 guy, Sean Boyle, tripped over me, and we both went down. And and of course, what did we do when we got up? Sprinted to the front.
Yeah, you're right. You ran as hard as you could to catch up.
Instead of being top 5 individually, I was like 57th. And our dreams died a horrible death. University of Virginia stopped calling me because it was just phone calls then. I mean, that's how life works out, right? And then here's the other. So I go to UNC Wilmington, and my roommates are from Longwood High School in Long Island. They were the state champions, and my roommates had a video of the start, and the video is of me sliding into the picture, curled up as a ball because I was afraid of getting spiked in the head, and Sean Boyle tripping over me. You see it. They have a video of 1990 New York State cross country championships, and they had it. So if you ever want to think I'm exaggerating, I was not exaggerating. That's exactly what happened, because they showed it to me about once a week my freshman year. So it's, the high schools, it was great. And I learned a ton. We had success, we had failures, but that's sports. And I really did learn a ton. And back to what you say about being on a team, we had a tight team. We had a phenomenal team, and we had 15 boys, and that was it. But we were tight, and we ran a lot of miles together, and learned a lot about one another, and learned about winning and losing together. And if I run across those guys, especially a couple, it's just like we never left, so it's just and the track teams were the same. So very proud high school. And track in New York, especially indoor track, is on steroids. You have 2 or 3 meets a week. My coach was not afraid of doubling, tripling, quadrupling me. So I learned about running tired like the whole season. I think I counted up, I did 100 indoor track races over the course of my career. Indoor track only 100 plus.
So the combination of consistency, being a runner 12 months out of the year and coaching led to you in high school receiving scholarship offers from Clemson and UConn, University of Houston, and of course UNC Wilmington, where you ended up going. But on one particular recruiting trip, you had brunch with a couple of track and field legends.
Yep.
Do you want to tell that story?
Part of it. I'm not going to tell a certain part of it, but I'll tell part of it. No, University of Houston. My high school coach, Joe Biddy, was friends with the coach there. He liked recruiting New York athletes because he knew kind of we were trial by fire there. New York, you're put through the coals. You either survived or you didn't, and he liked those athletes. So it was my it was the one recruiting trip that we were shown everything. Flew us out there. It was a great group of us, of 8 of us, a 7-foot high jumper of all things, a 50-foot triple jumper. Great people, girls and guys. And they rolled out the red carpet. So we stayed at the University of Hilton. I did not go to a class, ironically. Usually on those recruiting, I went to a William & Mary recruiting trip, and I went to a class, and that's when I realized it wasn't for me. I was like, I don't know if this is for me. This might be a little above my head, but yeah. So we didn't go to a class, but they rolled the red carpet, and one of it was brunch with Leroy Burrell and Carl Lewis, and obviously those names are legendary with being the best track and field athletes of all time, especially Carl Lewis. And to be quite honest, I was awestruck. They pulled up on matching Harleys. I remember that very distinctly. They definitely talked more with athletes that are in their events, which is cool. And they may or may not have made fun of the skinny white distance runners. So I was one of them. But yeah, it was all in good fun though, and I can't claim to know them. That was my only brush with either of them, but they seemed like really cool, real people. They were there for the University of Houston, trying to recruit athletes to their alma mater, and you have to respect that, especially as an adult looking back and through my eyes now. That was pretty cool. So that was it. I didn't go to University of Houston though, so obviously.
No, you didn't. You ended up going to the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. So, in contrast to the coaching you received in high school, your time at UNC Wilmington was, well, how do we say, much more inconsistent, right? Perhaps that's a fair way to put it. You mentioned you had 5 coaches in 5 years at the University.
Yeah, give or take. So I say give or take because the responsibilities a couple times weren't clear. But my freshman year, I was recruited by a great guy, Bill Kaysen, but he ended up leaving by spring track. So I was talking with Mr. Coleman and coaching myself spring track of my freshman year. Ironically, that's when I ran my fastest 5,000, 14:46, and I've yet to eclipse that, and I won't ever do that. We were so unorganized that year because Bill left. We went to Penn Relays, and I ran under a different name because he didn't. And I ran 14:46 under Sam Bobbitt's name. I couldn't believe that. But anyway, so and then the next year we got Jim Sprecher, who was a great, successful coach. He won several conference titles at UNC Wilmington, and went to Ball State in Indiana, his home state, then came back to UNC Wilmington, won more. And now he's at Lynchburg in Virginia, and he's a great coach. So don't get me wrong, but he's a track coach, and I'm now a distance coach. Ironically, he coached us my sophomore year, and his stuff was great. I mean, it was nice and basic and straightforward. And then he hired a distance coach my third year, and my fourth year, and it just, when you have 3 or 4 coaches in 3 or 4 years, then it's 3 or 4 different approaches. No matter how basic, you stagnate. And that was basically the summation of my college career. End of my fourth year, and I took a fifth year. I couldn't. I kind of put myself through school. Couldn't afford summer school, and I just put myself through school. And I ended up. I could have graduated in December of my fifth year, but I hung on for outdoor track. And I exclusively coached myself, not to go into anything, deep, because I think everybody's good people. It's just, I think they felt sorry for me a little bit, because they saw what I was, my year, and what I was kind of the last of the Mohicans that stayed there. And they allowed me to coach myself. I found myself a lot, and I'll backtrack for a second. And because I mentioned that this was sort of the beginning of coaching, I volunteered coach a couple of times in high school for junior Olympic teams for community service hours. I'm like, man, I dig that. I worked with kids at camps. I dug that. I dug kids. But because of the inconsistency, I found myself in the library a lot, and I was not studying. It was reading every book there was on running.
It was studying, but maybe it wasn't studying economics.
Yeah. Well, economics was it kind of came easy to me. So if I got my homework done, I was in there. So there's a lot of girls hanging out in the library, so I like going there. But in all seriousness, it was, I read a lot I took a lot of notes, and I found myself writing programs. What would I do if I was coaching myself? And an everyday program. Matter of fact, the kids at Co-Brown see sort of the format I started using in college for myself. And my proposal to them was, I'm a fit. I was looking back, I must have looked like I was full of myself to them. And I appreciate that. I was saying, I feel as if I can coach myself and these workouts, this is where I'm getting them from. We had long talks. I think that this will benefit the team. And however you want to do it, it could be you doing all the coaching, but I just want to be involved, and I want to have a little bit more say in what I do. And as a fifth year, and I'm sure they were dying for me to graduate, because at that time I'd worked my way up to have a full scholarship because of some of the accomplishments I had. But it was ironic because they said no to that, but they said I could coach myself, but then I had to submit my training. So they were super surprised, especially the head coach, that I gave a whole season long training. And he promptly gave it to the distance coach, and I would see my workouts on the board, because there was no computers. I mean, it's just the dawn of the internet, dawn of all that. On the bulletin board would be a week later. So exactly what I was doing 1 week, they were doing a week later. So, honestly, I didn't appreciate that because I was by myself and a bit ostracized. And I didn't appreciate that because it could have been a different story. So my passion came for coaching from that, because I never wanted another kid to go through that. And if I was a team that I was coaching, I made a promise right then that my communication would be superior. My training would be superior. I would do the best I could possibly do, train them to their individual needs. And that is very easier said than done, especially when you have a team of 50 to 60. You can't have 60 programs. You can't have 50 programs. So we ended up having, over the past 22 years, in any given year, we'd have 3 or 4 different programs for beginner runners, intermediate runners, and all the way up to veteran runners. So I feel good about that, man. I feel really good about it. But at that time, it was super trying. And I stayed for the school. I loved the school. I love the School of Education. I love what it did for me. And I did not know how I would pay for anything else because I had nothing. So I fulfilled my duties as a student athlete of UNCW. I went to every meet they assigned me to. I did everything they asked me to. And I tried to make things better, but maybe I didn't use tact as well as I would be using now. Obviously I was 21, 22, not 41, 42. But I learned a lot about dealing with people and productive conversations. And it shaped me, it shaped me in so many ways. And Dr. Carol Chase Thomas was the associate dean of the School of Education. She was another mentor. So like Mr. Coleman was one, Dr. Thomas was another. And she is this humongously strong, 5'0" lady, Southern lady that just has a way of building you up, and if need be, telling you like it is in a very soft-spoken way. And she spoke to me in so many different ways. I ended up being a graduate assistant for a couple of years, and there's so many great things about UNCW, and I'm proud of myself that I didn't give up on that place, because if I gave up on that place, then I wouldn't be right here talking to you, and I certainly wouldn't have the family I have. So I'm very thankful for my time there.
Well, there's no doubt, at least to me, in listening to the story, that that your time at UNC Wilmington absolutely shaped who you are today as a coach, and that's a good segue into this, Tim. 19 New Hampshire Division II cross country team titles, 8 New Hampshire Meet of Champions cross country team titles, 1 New England cross country team champion, 5 New Hampshire Division II track and field team titles, scores of individual titles, All-American, state records, New England records, multiple Coach of the Year awards, and even an induction in the Co-Brown Northwood Academy Athletics Hall of Fame. Tim, all that being said, what does success mean to you?
It's funny, when you started going into that, I was like, I was thinking about the people of Wilmington and the way they also shaped me. And I'm getting to your answer, to your question. But the friends I made there, Dan Peretti, Doug Liming, Darren Ford, Jamie Hall, Brent Kasich, because he and I met in grad school, John Collins. Those friendships, the relationships I had with them really shaped that. So when you say success, they became family when I have a great family. My brother, my sister, my parents, both my parents have passed, but it's a family. It's a great family. But when you're away, you find other ways. So to answer your question, success and what it means to me, I kind of put that resume together when it was during the pandemic. I had time, and my wife kind of said, you should put something together. You never know what life will bring. And if you ask me those numbers, Chris, even though I put that resume, I don't know them. So it's not necessarily about the titles and all that. It's really about the not to sound corny or cheesy, but the reason why I got into teaching, the reason why I got into coaching is for relationships with kids, and helping guide them to, going back to my experiences, to limit those challenging experiences. I still think they're healthy for you, but life's going to throw them at you anyway. So I also am very thankful for my time with Mr. Coleman and Dr. Thomas and what they gave me as a gift. And Mr. Biddy and Mr. McCormick, what they gave me, and Mr. Waples. Gosh, my elementary school teacher got me started running because he talked so much smack about a race we did as a phys ed thing, and I knew how to press my button. But they gave me a gift, and I just giving a gift like that through our sport. There's nothing better. And so when you ask me about my definition of success, one of the things I want to work on doing as a post-coaching, I'm taking a little break from being, on contract, is I want to reach out to our alumni, because one of the things that I just didn't have time to do was create that sort of community. And because one of the things that Brent and I had preached over and over again is we want this to be a lifelong, whether it's an endeavor, activity, passion, that's the gift. That's one of the gifts. Or how do you apply that gift to other parts of your life? Whether you're going into teaching, like I'm really proud of the fact that Lucas Fisher, Brooke Laskowski, they're on our staff, they're alum. We've had several alum come back and coach for us. Derek Peterson's our throws coach now after Mike Costa retired. It's the relationships. And to go back to gosh, you talk about the track titles, man. It's not distance, man. It's everybody, and the relationships we had with our coaches. Mike Costa and I coached together for 20 plus years before, the pandemic. He found that he wanted to spend more time with his family during the pandemic, and that's when he retired. And I told him, once he's done, I'm done. Gosh, it's only been a year or two, but it's those experiences, having Tom Tangway I coached his kids and worked with his kids, and he's now on staff, and he's still going to be on staff. And it's just making the relationships. Everybody's so surprised, the other teams are, about how many coaches we have at Co Brown. And that's a double edge, because you have to have one voice, but it's okay to have other voices, because then the more coaches you have, the kids are going to identify with somebody. And it's important for the kids to identify with an adult, a good example of an adult, a good role model. And we didn't let pride get in the way of that, because I think the more than one person can give the gift. So when we talk about relationships with kids, we also talk about relationships with coaches, because if you have a coaching staff, you played football, you have a lot of coaches on the football team. And if you find a relationship with one of them, I'm sure, at least, if not more, especially if it's a good staff. And it's really hard in track and field. You have almost just as many coaches, but it's not the same game. You don't work together as much. It's very much individual unless you're on a relay. So it's very much a challenge to build the team spirit, but I'm really proud that we did. And we did that because of our relationships with each other as colleagues, but also as athlete and coach. And I know when we're on to something, when the kids look to their coaches as teammates, and I say that in a way of teammates during the competition. because we see things clearly because they're an oxygen debt and they're not getting oxygen to their brains. And they listen. And so when they listen and we say, oh, we're a resource of information, you're the athlete, you're the one running the race, or you're the one stepping in the circle, or you're the one with the pole in your hands going down a runway to go. I coached polo for a while, but I don't understand those athletes. But anyway, you need to make the editorial decisions. We're just another source of information. So when they get that and we're able to do that together and we're firing on all cylinders, that's my definition of success. When you have full trust between a coach and an athlete in the sport, in the field of competition, that also spills over to if they need guidance in other aspects of their lives that's appropriate for a coach or an educator to give. Not to necessarily take the place of a parent at all, but there definitely is a place for a coach to give guidance. Obviously, 99% of that is with the sport, but that's the definition of success. And if we are able to teach those values and the values of hard work, which as the years go on, that gets lost, I think, at times, especially with the advent and the social media and how much that's taken off, and you see just the good or just the perfection in people. The value of hard work is a challenge. So once a kid understands the value of the I was talking to a parent last week, and they told me how, and I never get tired of the story, and I've heard it in so many different ways. The fact that one of our athletes missed practice because of a doctor's appointment, which is excusable. You got to go to the doctor, got to go to the dentist, got to go do these things. It's life. And he came home, got on their treadmill, crappy weather outside, got on their treadmill, still ran for the amount of time that was prescribed. When they do that, Chris, that's when they're getting it and they're receiving the gift, if you will. So that's my definition of success. If you do all those things, the titles, all that stuff, they come, and that's fun. Don't get me wrong. For the kids, and I will say for Brent and I remember winning the first title in 2003. We won the boys. That was expected. We surprisingly won the girls. That was not expected. We beat a Hanover powerhouse by less than 12 points, and that was not expected. But I remember walking and thinking to myself, validation. And it wasn't validation for me as a person. It was validation that our freaking training worked and our approach worked. So they're definitely benchmarks as far as state championships and things like that are concerned. Those are benchmarks. But it's really running into alum and hearing about their lives and hearing about their families, really, and hearing about how happy they are. It obviously is icing on the cake if they're still running, because I still believe it's a gift that keeps giving. But when I hear about how they apply what they learn to other things, especially those who go in the military, man, I've had so many kids that go in the military that they fall back on Co-Brown cross country and they say they got TK in their head or my voice in their head. Let's
talk about that a little bit, because I'm glad you that was perfect. Actually, I'm glad you actually used the word values, and this was something I wanted to ask you about, and I have a tie in to alumni as well. So if coaching philosophy is talked about quite a bit, and I'm sure at one point or another you've been asked about what is your coaching philosophy. But let me ask it, but in a slightly different way. So, if coaching philosophy is a set of values and beliefs about which transformation is created in your athletes, what are your core values, and how do they end up translating into coaching?
Those are the core values have changed, but they haven't changed over the years. And it all started with trying to search for the right words, love of what you're doing. And I learned this. This has been validated through some of the trials that my own kids have gone through, my daughter especially, and coming out the other side. So if you don't love what you're doing, if you don't love running, number one, you're not going to work for it. If you don't love your craft, whether it's football, whether it's running, whether it's wrestling, whether it's the debate team, whether it's math team, whether it's whatever you do, you're not going to put the time in to get after excellency. So excellence, I should say. So excellence, we talk about this with our team. I always believe everyone should strive for their own personal excellence. And so does Brent Kasich. So we're two very different people, but we align very well on our values. So our core values are the pursuit of personal excellence. And if you ask our athletes, they're going to say our core values are attitude and effort. And if you come every day with the appropriate attitude, meaning if it's a recovery run, you're taking recovery, meaning if we're getting down to business with interval work or racing, you have that attitude. Effort, the appropriate effort as well. You have to have, both have to work hand in hand with one another. But then we also throw that in with having fun, because with this sport, with any sport, why did you do it in the first place as a kid? To have fun. And if you lose the fun, and if you lose that, then you can't do anything. So they all kind of work together. So you ask about core values. I know I'm kind of rambling, but it's because it is a ramble. It's all of those things working with each other. The great attitude, great effort, having fun, the love of what you do will help you put in the necessary work to become excellent for your own personal excellence. We really try to talk to our kids because, gosh, you have 60 kids or 100 kids on our track team. They're all different levels of talent. You can't control talent. So to try to help them understand that, we always talk about personal potential and achieving your personal potential, seeing where you start and improving upon that. That's why we keep track of every single performance, every single time of every single workout. I have files from 2000 all the way to now, still paper files because I still do not put it on the computer. I'm still old school like that. Matter of fact, we did workouts today, and Lucas Fisher put together the workouts on the same table, on the same paper, same clipboards, and we're writing them down. And I told him, if you really need to be 21st century, take pictures and put them into a file. But right now you can look through I have files. So consistency, attitude, effort, they all work hand in hand. And if you don't have the love of it, you suffer a traumatic injury or sickness. It's going to be hard to come back from.
So check this out, Tim. So I asked my daughter Madison,
oh no,
who ran for you?
Oh no!
But before
I should have asked you this first. I should have asked you.
No. I purposely didn't. I purposely didn't tell you this.
Oh, great.
So I sent my daughter Madison a text, and I before this show, and I said to her, I said, I'm doing a podcast with Tim this evening, Coach Cox. I said, what words would you describe his core values? So I asked one of your former athletes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What your core values were. Okay. So you just described it from your perspective.
Yeah.
I thought you would appreciate the perspective of one of your athletes. Now this was 12 years ago now,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So get this. So this is what she said.
Okay.
She said, I would say as a coach, he valued team camaraderie, consistent and honest effort, and love of sport.
Oh my gosh.
Now, Tim, that's almost exactly what you just said.
Awesome.
She also said this. She said he knew how to push us to a point where we could surprise ourselves. She said he saw potential in all his athletes, not just the varsity team. And he coached as such, which made the JV athletes, she said me, feel appreciated and like important members of the team, which is something she said, which is sometimes not always the case in high school athletics. Tim, what do you think when you hear those thoughts from a former athlete?
That's it. Yeah. There you go. You got me teared up, Madison. You suck. That makes me feel good. It also, some thoughts I have, to be quite honest, is I'm afraid that maybe I haven't done such a good job with JV athletes in the last couple of years. And that's why one of the reasons why maybe I need to take a break, because I think Lucas and Brooke will do better. So, and I try, but it's tough. But yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. And I am happy to say I've heard that a few times, but the way you framed that, Chris, was masterful. So,
well,
you just tell her she got me, and She's still running.
Those were her
Yeah.
words, my friend.
That's cool.
Those were entirely her words. And I don't think there's any irony in the fact that both you as the coach and her as the athlete were able to describe your core values almost to a T. Because clearly these weren't just words that were scratched on a piece of paper given as a pamphlet given to parents on the first night of introduction. I mean, it was something that, it was, your core values are how you approached every day with the kids. Right. So, at some point, if it was a one-off, a one-liner, a subtitle to Co Brown Northwood Academy cross country, no kid would have ever remembered that. The truth is, you and Brent and the other coaches, you live that day in and day out. Let me ask you one more thing about coaching, and it's a pretty big thing. Clearly, you and Brent and your staff, over the course of 20 plus years, I read off just some of the accomplishments that the kids that you all coached achieved. It's not easy. It's easy to have a talented kid come across your ranks and for 4 years and run to state titles and makes you look like a great coach, makes you look like you have a great program. What I'm always impressed by, though, is the sustained success over time. In other words, the building of programs, the building of successful programs. I think by any measure, anyone and everyone that I've ever talked to who looks at and talks about Co Brown Northwood Academy, the cross country programs and the track and field programs, describe those programs as successful. Tim, what's the not a secret necessarily, but what's the formula, do you think, to build successful programs, sustainable successful programs over time?
Well, honestly, I don't know. I don't. It's something that just happened because it was a product of everything we've already gone over. As a coach, you have to love what you're doing. You have to love the kids, number one. If you're not a champion for kids, then what are you doing? Then you're in it for yourself. And I'm proud to say that Brent and I are never in it for ourselves, and the coaches that we choose to work with and choose to have on, we see the same thing. So I never set out for that. I never set out for titles. Matter of fact, like I said, in New York, you don't win titles. It's hard. It's such a huge state. It doesn't even occur to you. So when I started coaching in New Hampshire, I was super happy. The first year we got third. I'm like, man, that's awesome. If we get third every year, I'll be so happy. This is great. Because it was all about getting to know the kids. And it was all about getting them to believe in themselves. And that's still what it is. But every kid, like I said before, like you just alluded to, they have different levels of talent. We're just lucky. I won't even say it's luck, because I think that's everywhere, and every community has that. It's just investing in the kids and helping them to believe in themselves. And we have been lucky where different levels of talent have come, but also talent comes in the form of hard work, because some kids are everyone, not kids, but individuals. Some individuals are more akin to hard work, and some individuals look at that as they're averted to that. They don't want to do the hard work. And somehow, some way, over the consistency of what we try to teach, but the beauty of our sport and doing it every day and throwing something different at them every day and keeping the variety there between the long run and the tempo run and the fartlek, which I always giggle about, the easy run, the this, that. If they stick with it, they see the value in it, and it's just investing in kids. So when you talk about a secret, it's a lifestyle, and trying to teach a lifestyle. And, all of a sudden after those first couple of titles in 2003, didn't even mention the JV titles. We've won several of those. Those are byproducts of everything we're trying to teach. So when you talk about a byproduct, that's not what you're focused on. A byproduct is something that happens because of something. And it happens because we teach the love of sport, and the kids that choose to come out and stay because of the love of sport and the camaraderie that is built in the team. And there's great sports out there, but when you're running cross country and you're running track as a distance runner, or even as any kind of athlete on the track team, you share a lot of hard work, and it's not everybody's favorite thing to do. And when you share those things and you pull for one another, the boys team didn't win their first title for outdoors until a few years ago. And that year we had the field events scored as many points as the track events. And that's like you talk about a barometer for success. That day you had jumpers going over to the throwing cages. You had the throwers going to the distance side. They were all supporting one each other because they're the team. So as far as a secret, Chris, it's really just being there every day and being consistent, because the kids are going to see those one-liners, like you said. If there's nothing behind those, then they're not going to do it. They have to see that you're there for them every day and it's genuine, and they see bullshit from a mile away. So, they see BS from a mile away. So it's just, and I guess that's one of the reasons why, like, I've decided to take a step away. Both my kids are going to be going to the same school, two of my three, and Broden, I just feel like, because of his birth order, got the shaft a little bit with how much time. Well, I get the shaft actually because he's fine, but I want to spend more time with him. But I did feel like, I don't know, some of the things I put myself into doing, whether it's putting on a big meet with our community, or hosting a state championship, or meet directing a New England championship, I just felt like we could do it better. It's very basic. If I feel like I could do something better than what's been done before, not personal, but just something better, I get very motivated by that. I didn't realize that till probably 10 years ago. But if I also feel as if I'm not doing it to my full ability because my attention is diverted, and I feel rightfully so, because it's my family, and my oldest two kids are going to only be in college for a short amount of time. You know how that is. And my youngest is only going to be in 7th or 8th grade for a time, and then high school. Some of the veteran coaches in New Hampshire said their one regret, because they put all the time in the world, and it was they didn't spend enough time with their family, and that's not going to be me. So and I also, going back to what I really wanted to say, I feel as if the people that come after me, whether Lucas Fisher, Pete Larson, Brooke Laskowski, I think they're ready to do it better. I think they're ready to put the time in, and who am I to say that they're not anyway? So.
Yeah, and certainly in terms of inheriting a model of success, you are handing the program over to them, and the program is in really good shape. I wanted you before we get on to the last topic, I wanted you to just touch upon what I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, really the other two dimensions of building a successful program. Obviously, we've talked about the athletes and coaches, but I'm wondering if you would disagree or not that the other two important dimensions to building successful programs are parents and administration. Can you talk a little bit, Tim, about the role of parents and administration to the success of the programs and the program that you and Brent and the others have built over the last 20 years?
100%. If we didn't have the support of administration and parents, there's no way we could do what we do, period. Administration, Matt's kids, Dave Smith, and now Sam Strauss, they don't support what we want to do, from going to certain meets that we feel are more appropriate for our kids, to allowing us to bring 50, 60 cross-country runners, trusting us to do a camp in the middle of the summer, all the way up in Acadia, or, when Maddie was here. It's without that, that's not going to happen. And then, so super appreciative, like landed at the exact right place that allows us to do what we wanted to do. And then the parents, it's people see the events on the surface. So talking about the events, we can't have a big event if we don't have people that are willing to go park cars for us, be course monitors, work the shoot, work events. There's just no way. But the trade-off is great because the more home events we have, the earlier the kids get home to do their homework and they're happier, all this, all that, and the other thing. But the other part of the parent aspect is that's the other kind of level of success. When you can be on the same page as the parent as far as them understanding their role. And I could talk about being a parent myself with athletes on our team and understanding their role of helping to support, because we're all in support of the kids. You know, obviously the parents are number one, and they should be, obviously. What am I saying? You know, but it's but when they understand their role as a parent in their child's life as an athlete, nutrition, getting them to the doctor, making sure they get the sleep, making sure their priorities are in the right way for the goals that the kids have stated to them, helping them support to meet their goals. If parents are not in support of that, it is very difficult for the student athlete to have the success that they have communicated they want. So if that's not happening, that's tough. And I'm not going to lie, we've been at odds with parents before, not because we're trying to overstep, but because they may not have supported their student athletes the way that their student athletes want them to support them. So, and it's not been at odds where we're clashing. It's just been more of, okay, we feel bad because it's just not going to happen. So, but the flip side of it, when they do support, oh my gosh, it's the beautiful thing because we're able to take them to like a Nike Cross Regionals and eventually Nike Nationals. And without the support of parents, that's so difficult. It's so difficult. It's almost impossible. And I cannot tell you how many parents I've hugged because their athlete has, you know, everybody thinks about state championships, but Scott Cafaso is a name from my first year of coaching. He had spent the whole season. He was not athletic, and he'd be the first one to say it, but he broke 24 minutes for the first time at Plymouth, toughest course in the world, hugging parents. It's such a great experience to experience with them because they're the biggest fans. And without having that, it wouldn't be as enhanced of experience, but it definitely wouldn't be possible to do everything that we do.
Yeah, well, great segue into the last topic I wanted to talk about with you, and that is Tim Cox as parent and coach.
Yeah.
So your oldest two, who you mentioned, Addison, your daughter, and Aiden, your oldest son, who, by the way, are both running at the University of Virginia. Or
yeah, Aiden's going to go next year.
Aiden will be at the University of Virginia. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. But both of them ran for you, or are running for you, or ran for you at Co-Brown Northwood Academy. In other words, you had a chance to coach your kids. What was that like for you, Tim, to be able to coach your kids?
Well, I mean, you know, it's everything that we've talked about what we try to instill in our athletes, we try to instill in our kids, which is a love of running, a love of activity, a love of health, a love of the pursuit of excellence, if you will. So it was kind of natural. It's also natural because I grew up. I mean, you guys have known us long enough. You know, you saw them when they were little and following us around at the cross country courses, tracks, and at snowshoe races, and this, that, and the other thing. So everybody thought that it was a predetermined, that we were forcing them to do everything, but that's not the case, to be quite honest with you. And if you want to look any further than Broden, we never forced them out the door to go for a run. We never forced them to do anything. It's really up to them. And, you know, coaching Addison is a different experience than coaching Aiden. Addison is, as far as a communicator, communicated way too much in a good way. And then also Aiden, he's a boy. So teenage boys, do you get a lot out of him, Chris? Not really. Getting a lot out of Aiden now, thankfully, but it's with 2 seasons to go. But how can I say this? Coaching your own kids is the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. The highest of highs, when they do well, there's nothing better. And, you know, it's just the God's honest truth. They're your kid. So whenever your kid is successful, and whether people call me playing favorites, they're my kids. So when they're successful, there's nothing better. Okay. They're your own kids. But when they're struggling, that's the hardest thing in the world. and I have never been more challenged as a parent or a coach until my kids are struggling. And Addison went through a lot in high school, from Lyme disease to a stress fracture in her back, where prior to that, I saw her love of running waning because she was feeling pressure, because she was a good middle school athlete. And freshman year was great, sophomore year was tough, and then she lost her junior year to all that. But then, like, I go back to the love of running. If it wasn't for the love of running, she wouldn't have come back. And she came back and had an incredible senior year, and obviously, and now is at University of Virginia. So that's the lowest of lows. That's what I'm talking about. It's never about them losing. It's never about them losing. It's never about them not achieving a goal at all. That's part of life. It's about the trials that they go through, and when they're truly, truly struggling. And Aiden has truly struggled with growing pains, with PTSD from not knowing what his body's going to do. I mean, he grew so fast. I mean, he's taller than me now. It's amazing. And he's still working through that, and he's going to be great. He's going to be fine. But, there's just those moments that as a parent, what I'm talking about. And that's the lowest of lows. And it just gets multiplied when you're the coach. So trying to shelter them. Aiden was very successful as a very young kid. And saying no to interviews from national publications for a 10-year-old, and then kind of being lectured about denying my 10-year-old an opportunity to, that was fun, not at all. So we had our values with our kids, and, it was never about that kind of recognition. It's about love of running and the value of hard work and what you can learn about life through that. And I think both of them, including Broden, the third, but both of them, I still find Aiden's state championship rings in his car. Still find medals or plaques that are just very special, and they're in his bag, or they're in somewhere. There's not really trophy cases in our household.
It's very cool.
It's not about that with them. When Addison, and I'll end it with this, and this is what I'm most proud of with our kids. When Addison got back, and she, won a couple state titles, and, was the best runner in New Hampshire, and she went to UNH for a year, was on her way to UNH and on a full scholarship. And, when she, we took a breath, it was a lot of hard work, and we took a breath together. I'm like, hey, what did you miss the most when you were laid up for, we had to pull her off of indoor track her junior year. She was just so sick. She couldn't focus on schoolwork. And I'm like, what did you miss the most? Did you miss the winning? Did you miss the, she's like, no, I just miss being able to run 8 to 10 miles feeling good. And that's what she missed the most. She says she missed her runs around Bow Lake. She said she missed just running and feeling good. Aiden, when he's gone through what he's been going through, he said he doesn't feel pressure from being, people call him Aiden Cox, and kids ask for pictures with him. It's ridiculous. He doesn't feel pressure from them. He doesn't feel pressure from others and what they think about. He just misses running fast and loving the feeling of running well and that. So that's what he misses. So even in those lowest of lows that I just remarked, it's just, I feel good that because I feel as if those kind of values, they translate to success in life. Because if you're just doing it for the medal and you don't get the medal, then, and you cry about it or you're upset about it, then that's not why you do anything worth doing. So I'm really proud of them for that. So do we push them harder? We only push them hard if they're ready for it. It's the same way with every athlete on our team. Do we expect more? Yeah, we expect more, but that's in the respect of they've seen what we expect, and I expect them to know that before I even say it. And sometimes you forget that they're on they're kids. And have we been perfect? No. But it's been a great process. And Addison still texts me every day or calls me every day. So I guess things were pretty good with her. We'll see what Aiden does next year.
So all three of your kids, all three of your kids are smart and they're athletic. And so they clearly take after your wife, Jen.
100%.
But, and you alluded to it, but one of your kids, did something pretty special a few years back, and I want to ask you about that. You alluded to it in passing, but for the listener that's not familiar with the story, in April of 2016, your son Aiden, then a 10-year-old fifth grader, ran a 17:24 at the C5K road race in Concord, New Hampshire. At the time, setting the 5K world record for 10-year-olds. And after the race, you and your wife, Jen, finally told him that he had also set the world record for 9-year-olds at 18:03 at the same race the year before. But you didn't tell him that the year before. I have a couple questions about that. First is, why did you, I think I know the answer because I know you, but for the listener, why did you wait a year to tell him that he had not only broken one record, but had broken two?
Two reasons. One, he was 9. And what the heck does a world record mean to a 9-year-old? And that's not why he was doing it. He just was running fast. I think he was upset that he didn't catch the 35-year-old adult in front of him. I don't know. This just didn't come up. And the other reason too is, and I've always said this, I don't know if they record 5Ks in Kenya for 10-year-olds or 11-year-olds. So really, how much of a world record is that? So, and the third reason is, and this is why we turned down certain, I won't say opportunities, but certain interviews or things like that, is the last thing I wanted was fast forwarding to high school and his body totally changes. See, one thing you don't know, Jen, my wife, and just to make sure we understand this, she's the number one reason why I coach. Because if she told me to stop coaching, I would stop. Because happy wife, happy life, but I love her that much. It's what we do. And because of her support over the years, of all the hours, all the time, and really more of her getting involved, because she's very much involved, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. But where was I going with that? We didn't. Oh yeah, that's where I was going. So the Larsons, that's her maiden name, have some very big gentlemen in their family. The Coxes, we have some very big gentlemen in our family. Who knows what his body was going to do? You know, so the last thing I wanted was from as a junior, and he's struggling as a runner, and people walking by, don't you remember that kid? He was a world record holder. Don't you remember him going on this show or getting this interview? Come on. Too much pressure on a 10-year-old, 9-year-old. Some people got upset with us, but I don't regret that at all. I love it. And, you know, obviously he knows, but we had the conversation about the Kenyans and all that, and he doesn't care. You know, he'd rather not even talk about it because it's just not that important to him. And it's probably been broken. So
yeah, and I actually, I'm recalling now the conversation that we had about it at some point after it happened, and I swear I think you said the exact same thing to me about the fact that it's almost a certainty that that the world record, that there haven't really been opportunities for Kenyan 10-year-old boys to run a road 5K race. Yes, to your point,
with a tailwind.
With a tailwind and a pacer. Last follow-up question to that, Tim, is this, because I think this part of it I think is informative for other parents. How did you and Jen walk the razor's edge as parent and for you, coach, of a young protege? You know, I mean, you clearly he showed some talent and potential, but you didn't drive him harder. But you know, how did you balance that? How did you walk that very fine line of, my goodness, maybe we have something really special on our hands, and how did you show discretion? How did you not sort of lean in fully on the young kid and end up potentially driving him away from the sport, which clearly you didn't, because Aiden went on to continue to develop. How did you walk that
Yeah.
racer's edge?
We never forced him to do anything. It was we provided opportunities for sure. So we take him to meets in New York City. He ran the middle school national championships. Excuse me, indoor mile because he loved it. We took him to USATF national cross country meets. He won one of those. I think it was this 10-year-old. That was a good year for Aiden down in Alabama. But we also didn't go when the nationals were out in Reno, Nevada. We didn't go there. We could have, but we were like, man, 11 years old or 12, whatever it was. That's a lot to ask on a 12-year-old. So we always kept his age in mind. To go out to run at altitude, fly away across the country, that's a lot. That's a lot in high school. And I guess the perspective of being a coach of a couple of teams at NXN that had to go all the way to Oregon and deal with those challenges gave us perspective on that, because it's just a lot. And so I would like to say we never forced anything. And I'd also, if they ever had anything bothering them, I never allowed them to run. Jen and I never allowed them to run in pain. So they took days off. They did other stuff. They biked. They swam. They ran in the water. Something happened. They took a few days off. So and we just reminded ourselves they're 13, they're 12, they're 16, they're 17. We just got to be careful. Then they, like Addison didn't tell us about her back she didn't tell us about her back. And so, because she knew, and I guess that was the slippery slope of that, of kind of having that as a rule. Not that we said it was a rule. It was just like, that's how we reacted. So, it was, so razor's edge is an interesting term. But you got to provide the opportunity if they want it. We have obviously done that by going to these meets and traveling, but also never pushing. So we never said, hey, do you want to go do this? And if they said no, we never did. They didn't really say no. A lot of times it was us holding them back. If Aiden was allowed as a youngster, he would have been running 50, 60 miles a week, even 40. Matter of fact, he told one of our old friends on a run, I lied to him. Okay. So when he was 6th or 7th grade, I would say, yeah, you're running 40 miles a week. He was like, 20, 15, 20. And he told her, and she believed it. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, he doesn't even know how much he runs, because I don't even count it up. Like, we just go out and have fun. And I was on a run hike up in the White Mountains, for goodness sakes. It was just, he just didn't know. So we don't count. Like, it's like Broden right now is a great example. He's playing on the basketball team. He's playing soccer. We encourage that. On Sunday, we went down to Boston to the new track, and he ran for his junior Olympic club in a 3K. We don't train him for that per se. He came to a couple co-brown practices, did some stuff with the kids on the track, and there was nothing specific to it. And he ran the track race. And when his schedule allows, he'll come to practices. When it doesn't allow, we're not going to do that. He'll do bad. Like tonight, he had a basketball game. He's not going out for a run. It's one physical activity a day. And that was the same for Aiden, same for Addison. We're not going out of our way, so to speak. The trips we love, they're a lot of fun. We've had family members go with us. We've had friends meet us. It's fun. So, and if there was ever not fun, we didn't do it. So as far as walking the razor's edge, and I know we're running over time, but as far as walking the razor's edge, it's honestly, it's if you love of running, I'm talking love of your kid. So you're not going to over push your kid if it's, I don't know. I'm not here to lecture anybody else. So it's what worked for us. So.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah. I think sometimes parents, maybe make the not so wise decision at times, because it ends up being more about the parent and less about the kids. Parents living vicariously through the accomplishments and achievements of their kids. You clearly didn't need to do that. You had your own success as a young person athletically, truly it is and continues to be not only about you. I mean, you mentioned your kids, and I know when you say my kids, I know you're talking about your family, but I know you're also talking about every kid that you've ever coached when you talk about our kids. Tim, let's finish with this. It's a part of the show I like to call 3 random questions. It's a fun little segment of the show in which I spring 3 random questions on you. No preparation. This is completely off the top of your head. I enjoy seeing people think nimbly on their feet. So, but for the listener, will you confirm that you have not received these 3 questions in advance?
I confirm. Yeah, I'm most nervous about this moment right now.
Okay, here we go. First random question for Tim Cox. Tim, what was the last book you read?
Oh, I'm a reading teacher, so I should know this, right? You can put me on my spot. One More Day by Mitch Albom.
Okay, so Mitch Albom has he was a sports writer, but he also writes non-sports related books, I believe.
Yep, this is one of them.
What's the synopsis? What's the Reader's Digest synopsis of this book?
The basic premise of it is spending one more day. This former baseball player actually played in the World Series, but has fallen on hard times and very hard times. Becomes a drunk. Actually is in a drunk driving accident in which, well, anyway, he, I don't want to give too much away. He spends one more day with his mother who died 8 years ago. Okay. So the things that come up with that is pretty interesting. I highly recommend all of Albom's books, but this one really spoke to me, especially after my parents passed away. So,
and again, the title of that book was
One More Day by Mitch Albom.
One More Day by Mitch Albom.
I did pretty good with that one. That's good. I feel
you
good.
Did really good. You're off to a good start. Tim, random question number 2.
Yeah.
If you could have any superpower,
oh gosh,
what would it be?
We asked that on our website. I should do that one. I should have a stock answer for that one, but it's always challenging because the boring one is to fly, because everybody says to fly. That's boring to me. Oh, that'd be really cool though. Superpower, the Flash, man. Run fast. That's boring for a runner, but I don't care. Imagine running that fast. Imagine get turn back time. Come on. How many times does the Flash do that?
Well, it's funny because when I think of superpowers, and I think of you, and I think of your family, I actually think of The Incredibles, and I think of Dash, right?
That was Aiden, yeah.
Right? Wasn't he one of his boy that ran super fast and won all the races?
Yeah.
That's what I think. All right. Well, that was a fairly cliche answer, Tim, but we'll take it.
Yeah.
Tim, here's my third and final question for you. Tim, what's your final word for the listener?
My final word, one word. Is it one word?
Let's not interpret that literally. What is your final sentiment for the listener?
Key to happiness is love what you do. How's that?
I would say, well, I think that's extraordinary, and I would say that your professional career and your family speak to that, I think, in spades. Tim, thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you. How telling is it that my daughter Madison, more than a decade after she graduated, could still describe Tim's core values almost exactly as he did? That doesn't happen by coincidence. It happens because of consistency. Taking concepts such as teamwork, effort, and love, and being a living manifestation of them day in and day out. Kids notice those things. And when they begin to live your core values, success follows. Once again, you've been listening to the Eat Half, Walk Double podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, Please circle back to your homepage and click the follow or subscribe button to stay up to date with all the new content. And of course, if you really enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with your friends. I'll be posting some supporting media on my Twitter account at Coach Chris J. Dunn and the show's Facebook page at Eat Half, Walk Double, so make sure to check it out. And lastly, remember, the secret to living well and longer is to eat half, walk double, laugh triple, and love without measure. Until next time.